Hello and welcome to the van build vlog. Let's talk about gas. It is quite astonishing that although you are not permitted in law to go anywhere near your domestic gas supply in your house, you are quite at liberty, anyone quite at liberty, to do a gas install in a camper van. The only requirement is that you are competent, and there doesn't actually appear to be any definition of the word competent. Presumably, if something went wrong, the police and anyone filing a lawsuit against you would argue that you weren't competent, but they'd have to prove it, and they'd have to prove that it was as a result of your incompetence that whatever disaster happened. But let's hope that never comes to that. Let's skip over that. The point is, I am legally quite entitled to do the gas installation in my van, and I do intend to do as much of it as I safely can do. That said, I want to be safe, so I am going to get it at least checked over and hopefully overseen by someone who is suitably competent. And in terms of competence, although there is the gas safe register, which you would normally have to use for a domestic install, again, in a camper van, you can find people on the gas safe register who do leisure vehicles, but you don't have to be on that register. I think some of the caravan engineers and other leisure vehicle engineers, they're not necessarily gas safe trained, but they are trained under another scheme, which means they are defined as competent people to do the gas. Right, that was a lot of stuff about gas safety. Before we get into any of that, let me show you what I'm actually planning to do and what the gas setup I have is. On the boat, as with most boaters who have gas aboard, I have the Cala system. 2 bottles in the case of the boat, 13 kilos each, and the Cala gas system is a bottle swap. In other words, when the bottle is empty, you take the entire bottle back and they give you a new one full of gas. There's no refilling of the cylinders by you. I could of course do the same in the camper van, but I'm told that Cala gas and the bottle swap is not widely available overseas, so if ever I want to go travelling around Europe and I run out of gas, it might be a problem. You can alternatively buy camping gas cylinders, which are, I think they're butane, aren't they, rather than propane, and you can get those abroad, but they are much more expensive than Cala. But there is another alternative as well, and that is refillable cylinders, which can either be tanks slung under the body of the van, which I haven't got space for, so what I've got is a Gaslow 6 kilogram refillable cylinder. It looks like a normal Cala cylinder, albeit it's painted yellow, but the point is, as well as the mechanism at the top for supplying the regulator which goes to all your appliances, there is also this other hose, this one, which is looping around there, that goes to a filler cap on the side of the vehicle, and you can then refill the tank at any filling station that offers LPG. And this makes it much cheaper to refill your tank than doing any of the gas swap ones. Of course, what that also means is that this end of the hose needs to come out of the gas locker and over to a filling point somewhere on the side of the vehicle, and that's what I now need to install. This is that filler cap. This would be on the outside, and you dig a great big hole in your van, stick this through, and then the filler pipe connects onto here. Just tightens up really tight, like you would any normal gas pipe, because obviously it's high pressure gas coming in through there. And there's another half of this that clamps it in place effectively around the bodywork, but that just holds this, and then the pipe goes off that way. Let me see if I can just take this off and show you the filler. I'll try to do this one-handed. There we go. So that comes off. You get to the petrol station, take that off, and your LPG hose goes in there. The question then is where on the bodywork to put that filler hose. And you might just think, well, anywhere along there would be fine, but just in case there is any gas escape from that pipe, the manufacturers do stress that you shouldn't have it so that it's coming into the main habitation area of the van. You really want to mount it further down with that gas connection effectively outside, albeit somewhere behind there, so that if there were a gas leak it would just be venting to the outside. Now this means therefore that I obviously need to drill a hole in the bumper, and this bit you can see is just plastic bumper, and behind that there is a metal bumper, so I'll have to go through both. Irritatingly, there is a gap between the plastic and the metal bumper, so when I try and squish the two halves of the filler thing together, it'll just compress the bumper against the metal. So I need to put some sort of padding in there, a solid bit of padding, to give the two halves of the filler something solid to squeeze against. The first thing to do therefore is take this plastic bumper off, and it is held on with about 4 or 5 Torx screws, T30s, and then there's a couple of bits of trim underneath which use a T20, and I took those off when I was doing the heated ducting install, so that's easy. One slight complication is that there is also the wiring for the reverse parking sensors, so I'll have to be careful not to damage that as I take this off. Turns out it's not just Torx screws, there's a bolt under there and another one up that way, and you have to pull the bit of wheel arch out and very fiddly get a spanner in, and then this all just pulls out, which is a bit terrifying, but it does. So that side of the bumper is now free. Well, if I say so myself, ta-da! All the little parking sensors had tiny little unscrewing connections so that you could leave them in situ and not have to worry about pulling the wires off, but I had to do that first. I think I may have pulled one a bit too far, but we'll find out when I reconnect them later. But that is the bumper off, which means I can now study this side of the van and work out where the filler thing can go. Interestingly, if you like that kind of thing, there is this little air vent, and if you look you can just see some of that insulation that I stuffed down the corner piece. So that's kind of good, because it means that there is still air going to be getting up inside the van and ventilating it in the event of any moisture getting in there. And I know it'll be, if there is any moisture in there, which there shouldn't be, but it will be soaked up by the insulation, but at least it will get ventilated out again. So I presume that's a good thing. Now I'm thinking of having the filler cap for the fuel kind of in here, I guess. I think I need to delve underneath and look at it from the other side again. Right, I can't put the filler on that convenient flat plate because it turns out that is just about within the body of the van. It's where the floor meets the side, so we have to go down to this sort of level and peer around. And this is what I did suspect. The bumper is the most peculiar shape, and I need 2 good flat surfaces for the 2 halves of the filler cap to squish against. I can see no good reason for it being shaped like that. You can see, I mean, they made it all wibbly wobbly here. Instead of just a nice straight flat bumper bit, it's got all these curves in it. So I'm going to have to flatten that out somehow. I tell you something though, I can see no good reason for that hole to exist, or that one for that matter, but the bumper doesn't go into that. The wheel arch lining doesn't go into that. That simply screws up here and up top here somewhere, which is very awkward to get to. But there's no purpose to this hole. The bumper here is just flat plastic and there's nothing on the other side. So I might use that as the start point for where I could put the filler cap. Right, forgive wobbly camera work because I'm under the van. This hand is simply blocking the sunshine so that the camera will pick up what we're doing, because if I do that it just goes all dark anyway. I don't want to put the other side of that filler cap up near the top, because that's where the floor joins, and I don't want to cut holes in that. I like that to be nice and structural. I don't really want the filler cap behind this pipe, because that's the exhaust from the heater, and although it's wrapped in this heat-proof stuff, and I'd never be running the heater at the same time as filling the system with propane, I would still rather it was that the filler pipe didn't come out round this. So I'm thinking where that hole is, and then the idea is this bit, which is the other side, will go like that. There we go, something like that. So I need to make this a flat surface for this to go against, and also on the other side make it a flatter surface so the two halves can squish together. And then the pipe, the filler pipe, will come out of the back of that, along here, past the air inlet, which is cool, and will disappear up into the gas locker. Oh, actually, probably, hang on, where's the there's the air vent for the kitchen unit, so somewhere up here is going to be the gas locker vent, which I will run the filler pipe in through to avoid cutting more holes in the gas locker than I have to. We've gone completely out of focus, haven't we, because of that pipe. Let's see if we can do that. There we go. Right, so it comes out of there, and up. That should do. The plan is sand it all back, make a nice key around where I want it all to go, and then I've bought this plastic padding chemical metal, which is essentially a filler, which sets fairly hard, and I'll just try and have to work with that fairly quickly. I think it sets pretty quickly, and just build up something solid and flat and circular, and I'll give that a go after lunch, I think. Right, 170mm hole cut. The difficulty now is how much I need to pad in front of that to pad the space between the metal and the bumper, and I have a feeling it might be quite a lot, because I think the bumper comes down sort of here-ish, and of course the actual filler thing is only so thick. So I'm going to put the bumper back on and measure the distance and see what I'm dealing with. Right, it's just holding in position by friction, but you can see what I mean about the gap behind it if I push it, because okay, it's going to be in like that, but there's quite a lot of gap. So I'll go and look at it from the other side and see if I can measure the distance. Well, holes drilled, but a slight complication. First of all, I drilled it from the outside just into the metal, and then I put the bumper back on, and then I knew where the hole was going to be and drilled out. But I drilled straight out, forgetting that the bumper actually slopes down slightly. So in wanting this to be flush, the top bit would be flush, but because of the slope there'd be a gap underneath. And this thing has a silly little design. You see that tiny little plastic notch? There's one at the top and one at the bottom, and that locating into a little hole that you're supposed to make is all that stops this thing rotating when you put the filler nozzle in at the fuel station. Now that's a pretty wretched little bit of plastic, and having now gone at the hole again to try and make it flush, so I've slightly tried to widen the hole, not so much on this one, just angling it, but more on that one. I have nonetheless made this hole slightly bigger, so those silly little plastic notches now don't have anything to catch on. And it does seem to me a bit of a poor design, that, because there's not very much really on that to stop the whole thing going round. So I'm not sure what I do next. Actually, I'm going to have a think about it. Right, two silly little notches cut out just using a what do you call it? The blade from my the blade from my jigsaw, just by hand, literally just jigging it like that because there's such silly little notches. And this is still sticking out slightly at the bottom because of the curve. But if I push the whole thing tight, as it would be when it's gripped from the other side, then it does go flush, albeit at the expense of pulling in the plastic of the bumper a bit, which is no great hardship. From the inside it looks like that. So what I need to do is build up some padding around here so that when the back screws on, and it screws not through the metal but into the filler itself, but they do need to pull each other tight, and the back bit will need to have something to rest against. Its lip, its circumference, if you like, needs something, so I will have to fill that area. And hopefully that'll do. It's now some days later, and as you can see, there's no sign of the Gaslow filler poking out of the hole in the plastic bumper. But peer a little closer and you'll see that I had to change tack, for there it is, attached simply to the metal of the bumper, instead of trying to pull it through both the plastic and the metal. It all just wasn't working out terribly well. It was going in at a funny angle. I was having to compress the bumper using the screws that hold the back on the Gaslow filler. It wasn't very good. And I thought, well, you know, it's just a hole in the bumper. I can poke the filler hose through that quite happily. So I added a bit of the liquid metal stuff on this side of the bumper as well, and fastened the filler on. So now you just reach through, take that out, there's your filler point, and the hose on the back I will show you from underneath. Incidentally, for all those people who've been worrying about splashes of water going up the pipes, I should point out that there's this underbody stuff, and there's a mud guard at the front there. So actually all the pipes which are kind of up there-ish are quite well protected from splashes, and likewise any fumes coming back off the exiting exhaust pipe would have to come out of the exhaust, back under the van, out, round, and then up if they wanted to go into the van. So I'm not sure I can show you the other side. Hang on, is that going to work? Oh, there it is. There's the filler pipe resting against the cold air inlet, so that's okay, of the heater system, and that's the back of the filler pipe. I am going to put some sort of protective shield between those two pipes just so they don't chafe against each other, but that's the gist of it.